Join me and Kevin Appleby as he shares how he helped grow Rule's HVAC success from the ground up, landing 40 major projects in just a few years. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Purpose-Driven Progress. I'm your host, Jacob Hicks, as always. And today I am so excited to be sharing some really phenomenal just business and sales stories with my guest, my really good friend, Kevin Appleby, a key player at Rule, where he helps bring bold architectural visions to life. In just a couple of years, Kevin and the team have gone from 0 to 40 building projects, making a serious impact in the HVAC industry. We're diving into his story of resilience, growth, and navigating the ever-changing world of design, construction, and sales. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Jacob, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so excited to have you, man. So, let's kind of start at the beginning here. So, I know nothing about HVAC of any kind. So, kind of tell us what does Rule do? Because I know you guys primarily work on larger buildings, right?
Yes, so it's basically, in a nutshell, it's not that complicated. So HVAC is all around heating, cooling, and ventilation. Obviously, people that live in buildings, everybody spends more than half of their time, even more, 80% of their time in buildings. And we make sure that in summertime, they have a cool atmosphere. And in winter, it's warm enough. And in the best case scenario, just bring some fresh air to the building. So that's what we take care of. We design high-rise residential and commercial towers here in New York City. We do industrial projects across the globe, especially in our home turf, Europe, Germany. That's where we're from. And what makes us unique, we design all these building systems without the use of any fossil fuels. So we try to make sure that all the technology we bring to a building, we bring into a design, and we make sure that we run it on renewable energy. That's our main goal. Not always achievable, but we give our very, very best. So in a nutshell, it's heating, cooling, ventilation.
I love that. So, kind of tell me a little bit more about your backstory. So I know you said you're from Europe originally, right? So did you just, wake up one day and say, hey, HVAC is going to be my thing?
It's kind of randomly how I ended up here in New York and in the HVAC industry. It's actually a personal story.
Okay.
But my background is I hold a bachelor's and a master's degree in economics. I was always intrigued and very interested and fascinated about building a business, my own business. That has always been a dream of myself. And it was hard to get there. So I had many ideas. I started my first company when I was 16 years old. Man. Obviously, that was not successful. But along the road, I just had many, many different ideas, and I never really had that last piece to bring the company over the finish line and actually make it a company. So I ended up in the corporate world in sales, and that's where I kind of evolved. That's where I got to learn about sales principles. I had great mentors and trainers and coaches that kind of guided me through all of the proper channels of what is sales. And it was a high discipline also to myself to start reading many different books, reading everything about sales, listening to inspirational people that have been in the sales world for a long, long time. And then, due to a family matter, I ended up meeting my now wife, which her family was in the HVAC world, and they were very successful in Europe, very successful in Germany. And they told me, hey, Kevin, what about North America? You're a native speaker, and do you think we can expand our businesses to the United States? And I told them, hey, I have no idea of the construction industry. I don't know nothing about HVAC. Same situation, Jacob, as you described. But I told them I can sell stuff. So I can give it a try. No guarantees. I know I can sell. And if I go to the United States, I tell you this, we will become the player for sustainable building technology if you do decide to send me to the United States. And that's what's happened.
I love it, man. Well, I feel like you really hit on something that can be really easy to overlook, particularly maybe in the sales world. And it's always about learning more, right? I really believe that sales is an art. Each individual, we all have kind of our natural tendencies, when it comes to closing and how we deal with clients and everything. But I really think it's an art where you're like, you have to be constantly like trying new things and experimenting and figuring new stuff out. Have you found that to be the case since you've come to the States?
Oh, absolutely. It's you have to leave your comfort zone
Yeah.
24/7. You
Yes.
talk to many different people from different kind of
Mm.
fields, and you constantly are just dealing with new stuff. So I truly believe it's all about learning, it's all about adapting, it's about being lean, agile in the market, understanding and in some way anticipating trends. And your wording just becomes, depending on who you speak with, it just changes all the
Yeah.
time. And a very, very perfect example. So for us in the construction world, we're very, very not independent, but not dependent on government and politics.
Mhm.
So depending on who runs the show kind of determines what happens in our industry to some degree. And being a company that focuses on sustainability, on renewable energy, energy efficiency,
Mhm.
and the change in administration did cause for us to change our wording from decarbonization to asset value, shareholder value, energy savings in
Interesting.
terms of dollars. Everything became more around economics and a
Mm.
business case than it was decarbonization in the last couple of years. So that's when I say it depends on a variety of factors and who you speak with, how you adapt your wording accordingly in a matter of seconds or
Yes.
milliseconds.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really curious about one other thing here. And we'll dive into more specifics on, you guys and what you guys are doing, but I'm really curious because I've, born and raised in Iowa. I've been in the States all my life. I've only sold in the Midwest, and I know that selling in the Midwest versus selling like in larger markets like New York or LA or Seattle, it's very different, particularly in the pacing. Usually, that's at least that's what my understanding. Have you found that to be the case, selling in Europe versus selling in the States, or are there again a lot of similarities there, or more differences, do you think?
It's a huge difference.
Mm.
It's a big, big difference. I have the feeling that people in Europe, especially in Germany, they don't like to be sold to.
Okay.
They have this, I don't even know what they have, but they don't like to be sold to. In the United States, it's completely different story, especially in the
Mm.
market in New York. I have the feeling that everybody loves to be sold things to. It's like it's all about the sales, it's all about the negotiation, it's all about sitting at the table,
Yep.
talking numbers, talking opportunity, talking business model, and the greatest idea wins. That's my feeling in New York, and that's what
Mm.
I enjoy every day. That's what I love. In Europe, it's a little slower.
Okay.
It's not as paced as it is in New York, but that's my feeling here.
Interesting. So do you feel like in Europe at least the sales cycle is like longer, or if you're sitting down at like the closing table, are you just using like softer closes?
It's the first challenge is actually getting to the person you want to talk to.
Okay.
It's cold calling, cold emails, reaching out on social media. It's
Mhm.
very, very difficult to convert a cold lead into an actual conversation. That's been something that I have been struggling in Europe. It's not
Mm.
easy. I think you have to find your own way kind of approaching,
Yeah.
especially decision makers.
Mm.
Once you have the right person at the table, then I think closing becomes it's quite similar. It's quite
Okay.
similar. But I think it's the biggest challenge of actually approaching the right people at the right time, getting them to the meeting. That's the big problem I see.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Sorry. That's just a little sales tangent for me that I've always wondered about. Um, but I would kind of hit on it in the intro a little bit, but you guys have remind me again, how long has it been since you guys came to the States?
Yeah, so we expanded to New York almost 3 years ago. So the
Okay.
beginning of 2022.
Okay.
That is almost 3 years ago. We came to the city. We visited a trade show, which was in the construction field. We
Mm.
did not know what to expect. We didn't know anybody in the market. We did no outreach. It was just let's go to New York. Let's feel the vibe. Let's listen to some panels. Let's see what's happening in the construction industry and kind of get an understanding if people feel the need of the services that we are providing. And that's how it all started out. So 3 years ago. And I remember the day perfectly well because I told my business partner, Michael, I said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, listening into these panels and hearing people talk about energy transition in buildings and electrification. I was like, oh God, this is spot on. Now we have to kind of, how do we get to these people? And there was one person that I thought would be very, very valuable for us to speak to. And I remember he was sitting on a panel, he was on stage, and there were like 100 people around him trying to talk to him. And I just grabbed them by the arm and pulled them over. And I was like, hey, we're from Germany, and we need to explain you something. You need to take yourself 5 minutes now and listen in. And that kind of was exactly the person we needed to talk to. And the rest was kind of history, which I can dive into later. Yeah.
Love it. Well, kind of talk to me about, some of that growth. Cause I would have to imagine that. Did you feel like when you first came over to the States, did that feel like a little bit intimidating because you're not only breaking a whole new territory, but you're breaking a whole new country and continent? Was that intimidating at all? Or were you just more excited, or how'd you feel?
It was mixed feelings. It was at first for me, obviously not knowing what to expect in the construction world and not being from the MEP or HVAC industry. I was completely excited. I was enthusiastic. I was reaching out to people, cold calling, emailing, meeting people, telling them about all these great stories. My business partner was, on the other hand, he was kind of frightened of the size and the massiveness of New York City.
Yeah.
It's as things start to kick off and that stone starts rolling, then it can become easily very overwhelming just due to the massive market that New York City has. To give some key numbers of New York. So New York City has 1 million buildings in the 5 boroughs. That's just New York City. It's Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, Bronx, and Brooklyn. And from those 1 million buildings, there's a law that came or was set in 2019, which required every building larger than 25,000 square foot to comply with a so-called Local Law 97, which is for every building that is emitting carbon per square foot will pay a certain fine.
Wow.
And that number of buildings is our market. It's 55,000 buildings. So to my business partner, Michael, was, if Kevin now sells all these projects, like, how do we take care of that? How do we handle that? And it's exciting because the market is huge. It's also very challenging because how do we build up resources so quick, because targets are very, very ambitious in New York.
Yeah. Well, 100%, because the thing that I think people can lose sight of sometimes is that, you want to be successful. You want to get a bunch of business all the time, right? But you also want it to be very manageable, sustainable growth. You don't want to go from, 0 to 100 all of a sudden, and then you don't have the systems or the support staff or whatever else, the resources to manage all that work, right? So, because you guys have gone, like we said, from 0 to 40 building projects now this year, right? Was last year. So how have you guys managed such incredible growth?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we in Germany obviously have some backbone, since it's a family business that was founded 60 years ago.
Yeah.
There was some substantial workforce already in place, and as we expanded to New York, we did have that backbone. We're obviously growing in the market, hiring local workforce.
Yeah.
But we have our engineers in Germany, so we could always rely on our partner company in Germany when we needed assistance in handling a market of this size. So that was kind of, the business kind of had its status from a European perspective already that we could rely on. So going from 0 to 40 was manageable. But going now from 40 to 100, that's now the challenge we're facing as a company, especially here in the US. We have to find local workforce. We have to find young, motivated professional
Yes.
engineers that not only want to work in this industry, but they also have to understand this kind of way of working, to kind of give an insight. What we're doing is not known in the market, which has given us the opportunity to actually accelerate here. None of the local firms that we're dealing with, well, none is not right. A lot of people are trying to reach New York City's goals in terms of decarbonization, but I think the German approach, the German engineering approach, is slightly different, and that we need to educate to local people and local workforce. So that's something that we're trying to tackle as we speak, is how do we find the right people and how do we train and educate them in the German engineering way?
Yeah, which I mean, I feel like is always kind of a challenge when you're presenting something new or newer to the market, where you have to not only find the people to work for you and with you that have the education, the understanding of, hey, this is what we're actually trying to do, but also being able to educate like the potential clients and the prospects, right? I mean, has that been pretty challenging, or how's the market responded so far? Must be pretty well, I would think, right?
Yeah, so due to the law that was put in place in 2019, there's a big pressure on the market.
Mm,
So a lot of these building owners, especially the clients we deal with, they own large portfolios that are all kind of tackled by local law 97. So all of
mm,
these owners need to move forward with some sort of strategy and roadmap towards decarbonization.
yeah,
Um, and I have the feeling that there's only a handful of engineering firms that can actually help these portfolios. So if you have 55,000 buildings on one hand and you only have, let's say, 10 companies that can actually move this forward, that's
hmm,
not enough. That's
yeah,
not enough workforce. That's not enough people. So I guess there has to be some sort of strategy. Where do we develop workforce? Where do we find these people? How do we educate and train them and kind of help these owners meet their compliances? Um, is the local law 97 to be challenged in some ways? Yes, it could be. Or could we develop workforce that can actually take care of it? I think so as well. That's a good move.
yeah. Well, I'd
Um,
have to imagine that. Because I didn't even think about it from that angle, where there's so many of these people that own, you know, tens and hundreds and whatever, thousands of these buildings, right? They all been a big chunk in a big, huge portfolio with maybe several owners, but they went from, you know, like not having to pay this carbon tax to all of a sudden having to pay it, right? And like that was, I would have to imagine, particularly for these bigger guys, a pretty large expense that just kind of just chucked at them all of the sudden, right? So I mean, how are you guys? You were talking about earlier about scaling from like the 0 to the 40. Now you're trying to get from the 40 to 100, right? So how are you guys kind of managing the sustainability and making sure that's manageable for you over the course of the next year or two? Are you like making sure you're focusing on hiring like new salespeople as a main like engineers? Are you being like a little more picky and choosy on what projects you're taking on? How are you guys kind of handling all of that?
yeah, so obviously the more the better. We want
Mm,
to we want to grow as quick as possible. There's
yep.
two different routes we can go. We can either grow organically and do it by ourselves,
Yep.
as we're doing as of today. To give some insights, we increased our revenue by 10 in just 12 months,
Man.
from 0 to 40 buildings, which is very impressive as a
Yeah.
young firm in the United States, especially in a tough market as New
I'll
York.
say.
But obviously, we wanna grow bigger. We wanna grow stronger. We wanna start collaborating with other firms. We wanna find potential new clients. So that's one route. The other route is find an external investor, perhaps. Grow with external capital, grow quicker, grow faster, grow stronger. Scale, just start scaling quicker.
Yeah.
It both has kind of pros and cons, and we as a firm, we're in that strategy conversation right now, which path to choose. So we don't really know yet. We are growing organically. And how do we do that? First of all, we need salespeople. We
Yeah.
need people that reach out to the market and say, hey, there's a new player in the city. There's a new player in town. We can help you and assist you through those challenging roadmaps to decarbonization. And then on the other hand, we need people that can actually do the work. So we need the engineers. So we need both. And we need to grow our structure as a firm while managing all the other growth things that we were talking about. So it's quite a lot. It's quite difficult. And obviously you need to earn the dollar before you can spend it on workforce. So it is, you have to look at it from a variety of different perspectives if you want to build a sustainable business.
Absolutely. And it's hard. It can be a hard balance to strike sometimes, because you're like, you get, 5 more projects tomorrow, then you gotta, like, that's great, fantastic. But then we also have to make sure that we have the workforce to manage all of that. I mean, it's a constant flux in and out, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious though, we talked about it a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit more into like your sales background here. So in an industry, particularly in New York, with like so many, like there's like, smaller players, and there's like some really, really big players out there too. I mean, how have you managed selling in your work when like the relationship and reputation is just so key?
That's a really good question, and people often ask me this, and I sometimes ask myself, how did we get in touch with so many great and fantastic people in New York? And I think it comes down to, obviously, to the relationships. How do you build relationships? How do you maintain relationships? I read a book, and I think you know this, and probably a lot of in our audience, How to Win Friends and Influence People, or How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's been very impacting on me, lasting on me. It's these people I reach out to, I don't try to sell them stuff in step one. I just want to get to know them. I want to start building up a relationship with them and understanding what they need and understanding how we could help. And building a friendship, essentially, is what I'm trying to achieve. And it's been going pretty well. So a lot of our clients are actually people I spend time with outside of the office. We go for runs in Central Park. We discuss opportunities over dinner. We do all these fantastic things outside of the workplace. And I think that's been something that is very key to my sales approach. Is business is one thing. Humans dealing with humans is the other thing. And if the human can deal with the human, then I think everything else just will follow. And that's been very, very important to how I approach and how I build and maintain relationships.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I think really what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like what you're talking about is coming from abundance, right? Where really, like when you're sitting down at closing table or first introduction with somebody, you want to see if you're able to help provide a service to them, right? And obviously, we're running a business, so we got to make sure that we are out, closing deals, of course. But if you come from a place where you are, again, like service first, I think that's, it's so much better than the alternative. And I'm a big believer. I'm not sure if I was talking to you about it, Kevin, but have you read The Challenger Sale? Are you familiar with that at all?
I did not, but I'll put it on my bucket list.
So that's, that one's, I'm a huge fan of that one because it's very, very sales data driven. And it talks about like the different forms of, salesmen and all that kind of stuff. But my favorite takeaway from that is like when we're talking about relationships, particularly in the sales world, I think this book says that the folks that have had the most success are, yes, the people that are building relationships, but that top, the upper echelon of sales, like that top, 10 or 1%, those are the folks that are willing to push back a little bit. And I always think that like people can sometimes feel uncomfortable with pushing back on a potential client. Like you don't want to upset them, but you also want to show that you are out for their best interest at the end of the day. And it's kind of like when we're talking about like personal relationships, like again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that if, maybe your wife was, displeased with you in some way, she would probably push back on you a little bit, right? Saying like, hey, Kevin, we can't be acting like this, right? And I think that's true, just as true as in the sales world. When we're talking about challenging somebody, just push back on them and saying like, hey, based on what you've told me, X, Y, and Z, I would really strongly suggest going with option one as opposed to option two. Do you feel like that's true in what you've experienced too?
I agree. I agree. We often get told that here in New York City, we're the crazy Germans with the crazy ideas, and you must be out of your minds designing buildings the way you design them. And that's the pushback that we get from some of these clients that we're working with. They're like, this will never work. And we tell them, well, it will work. We have been designing these across the Atlantic, and we have a lot of experience, and we did many mistakes in the past, and we went through that learning curve today already, and we know that it works. And we have to, as you said, look for the best financial and technical approach and pathway for our clients. And some things they just haven't seen yet that exists in the market. They might heard of it, but they haven't seen it. And I think that's the pushback we're getting. But as you described, we're looking out for their best interest. And that's why we do need to push back and tell them this will work. There's other opportunities.
Yeah.
Innovation is risky. We understand it. But without innovation, there's no opportunity to go to chase or to go after.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about the the relationship side of things, and you kind of mentioned earlier about that one gentleman at that trade show that when you first kind of was thinking about coming over to the States, and when you sat down and talked to him, but was once you first kind of came to the States, like, hey, we're doing this thing, and we're starting at zero, right? Nobody knows who we are, all that kind of stuff. Is there a deal or a specific client relationship that really shifted things for you and really kind of helped get the ball rolling?
There was. So after sitting down with this person I met at the trade show, he was a policymaker, and I knew that he knows a lot of people in the market. He knows a lot of building owners. He knows a lot of local engineering firms. He knows architects. He probably knows everyone. And I knew when we sat down with him that we have to explain to him our different approach, our different perspective. And he straight up, very transparently said, you're going to upset a lot of people in the market if you bring this approach, because it's so new. It's fantastic. It's phenomenal, but it's unseen, and people won't trust it, and people won't understand it, and they're going to be afraid. And we needed to find a local partner that believes in us. And we needed to find a building owner that also believed in us. So that we did find. After long search, after the support of this policymaker, we did get introduced to a local engineering firm that was, let's try it. Let's give it a try. We have a client that is open for experiments. They're open for innovation. And down the road, maybe we as a local firm might learn something as well that could be beneficial to the market. So we did find that one key player, and they trusted us. They gave us an opportunity. They put us on stage, and this stage was the highest stage you can be in New York. So the pressure was on us. We had to deliver.
Yep.
And in just only 6 months, we presented our designs. Everybody was happy. Everybody was excited. The project came to life. Very excited about that as well. So we did deliver. And from there, everything just started accelerating. And that was, to me, that key moment to find somebody in the market after long searching that believed in us and trusted us, not only from an engineering perspective, but also from the building owner side that said, we're up for something new. And that was that key project. And from then, every milestone we reached, there was another key moment. So I have the feeling there's several, but that was the tipping stone. And then from there, meeting different owners from that platform that we performed on, we met the largest portfolio owners in the city, stock or public traded, private owned, big companies. We are talking to large policymakers. We're talking to foundations. We're talking to the White House. We're talking to
Man.
to all these different organizations. And I think I told you in our introduction call, I actually met the Clinton family with their foundation. I received a letter by President Bill Clinton just a couple months ago. So that's how quick things can move if
Man.
you are pushing in the right place.
Man, that's not that just low key, just talking to the White House, talking to presidents and former presidents, right? Like, no big deal. As an HVAC, I love it.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's a big deal. Well, I mean, like I'm a big believer that, I mean, sales for sure, but I mean, entrepreneurially and just business wise, I think that if you have the gumption and the wherewithal and the grit to just continue with the humility that you're going to make some mistakes and, hey, like this way didn't work, so I'm going to try a different way next time, and just iterating, I'm a big believer in, I call it ABE, always be experimenting, just trying different ways to do different things. I really don't believe that people can be unsuccessful as long as they come with humility and that grit.
Absolutely. It's 24/7 all the
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Give it your all. It's not easy. It's frightening and it's stressful and the pressure is super high. If you're an entrepreneur, it's about survival,
Yeah.
ultimately. So everything you do, you're trying to convert into dollars. So
Yep.
you have to fight for survival. So that's been something that I live by every day. It's consistency. You have to show up. You have
Yeah.
to show up. You have to pick up the phone and you have to make that call. Nobody will call you, especially if you're not known. Nobody
Yes.
will call you. So you just might as well grab the phone, dial that number and just call and reach out to people and tell them your story. And you have to do that all the time,
Yep.
nonstop. And it never
Yeah.
ends. Even if you're an established player, it stands and falls with the amount of hours you spend on your dream, chasing that vision and reaching that goal. And you will set new goals after you reach the first ones. And it just never ends. And I think that you just have to enjoy. And if you enjoy it, it doesn't even feel like work anymore. It's just like your passion now.
100%. 100%.
That's something that has been driving me. Has been driving my partner. It has been driving our family to think this way, to think these directions. And I guess our close community of a family business has been a big influence on our success as well. It's not just myself, it's our entire family. It's everybody involved. It's our great employees that is pulling on the same string, that has this vision,
Yes.
that wants this impact on the globe. And that's huge. That's huge. And I enjoy it every single day.
Yeah. Well, so I love that. And I feel like you hit on a really key point that, again, is super easy to overlook where, like, yes, we want to set goals, right? Like revenue goals, client goals, whatever, right? Like we want like very tangible things to be striving towards. But I think like in the day to day, we have to figure out how to fall in love with the journey, right? And like, obviously there's going to be days like, this as well as I do, particularly in sales, where you show up and you make your calls, whatever, your call list might look like for that day. You make your calls and it's just crap, right? Like nobody picks up the phone. There's a ton of voicemails. It's really just nothing is jiving, right? But then you're also going to have days when you pick up the phone and your first call and it's just like that. You close a deal and it's fantastic. And you have to fall in love with the journey and why you're doing it over the long term. One last thing as we're kind of wrapping up here, Kevin, is I know we kind of hit on a few of the goals and stuff that you guys have in the books and cooking here over the course of 2025. Is hiring kind of the big push for you guys right now, or what's kind of the number one priority for you over at Rule?
So we obviously want to grow. Growth means we want to close more deals. We want to find new clients. We want to make more money. We want to spend that money. We want to invest that money into hiring folks. We want young, motivated engineers. We want salespeople. We want people that live our dream, that breathe our air, that think the same way we think, that want to work 24 hours. Just kidding. But yeah, I think for this year, for the next 12 months, we wanna hire big.
Okay.
We want to increase revenue. hopefully double revenue. That would be very, very concrete goal that we have set.
Okay.
So that's kind of like in a nutshell what we're looking at. We want to keep up the work ethic. We want to keep up the drive. We want to be open for collaboration. We understand as a small and young firm, we're not going to be taking care of all the buildings of New York. So we're very open
Not yet.
to, yeah, not yet. We want to collaborate with our local folks. We want to collaborate with people familiar to the industry, with great engineering firms that are out there. We want to collaborate with policymakers, which we have been in the past. We want to create new programs around funding some of these efforts that we're trying to achieve. And we want to make sure that we explain the story of decarbonization a little bit differently. I have the feeling that decarbonization has always been go renewable tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's just not doable. It's very, very difficult to reach carbon neutrality in a very short period of time. It does take a lot of time. And to some degree, and we're very strong believers in this, is that fossil energy and renewable energies must go hand in hand to a certain degree. And where you need fossils, you need to use fossil.
Yeah.
If you can replace fossil with renewable in an economic, sensible way, then you can replace it. So that is something that I think that I have on my own
agenda. Yeah.
agenda, is to explain the market, explain the country, explain the world that decarbonization is doable, but not tomorrow. So
Yeah.
that's
And I mean,
something
it takes,
that I want to make sure. Yeah.
like you said, time, effort, and money, right?
Yes.
So, Kevin, if anybody out there is listening, maybe I'm a salesperson that's looking to make a career change, or an engineer, or maybe I'm somebody in New York that thinks like, hey, I need some of this, carbon neutral HVAC stuff that I heard on this guy's podcast. Where can I find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just reach out, connect, follow. My name is Kevin Appleby. You'll find me if you put in New York. I think you can find us on www.rule.org. So we have our website. We have all our contact information on there as well. And I'll be sharing this session throughout my network. So everybody who follows Jacob will see me in the show notes, and I think you're going to link my contact information out there as well.
Yep. So I'll make sure to leave your LinkedIn contact information in the show notes, and then rule.com too, or .org, and make sure everybody can find you just as easily as possible. But Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been fantastic to have you.
Jacob, thank you so much, and thanks for the great efforts. I think sales is something everybody needs to understand.
Yes.
Everybody's selling every day anyhow.
Yes.
No matter in what situation, you're selling yourself in some way. And I think people should really take awareness, or be aware of how to approach it in their own individual way.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, yeah, Kevin, thank you again for coming on today. And anybody listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you have a fantastic story, just like Kevin did today, and you think the world should really hear it, make sure to go to jacobhickscoach.com and check out my podcast page. We're taking guest applications currently. So I'll see you guys next time.